This is your girl Denise, straight out of New Jersey, representing for one of the hottest retro party for sure. It's called Fan Fusion, episode 4, Mixed Intoxication.
At Bayview Villas, waterfront property.
On Saturday, July 8th, with music by Styles FM DJs, of course. It's guaranteed to be hot. So wear your tropical attire. Don't miss it.
It's a place our kids will never know. Take me back to the old days when there's used to nice. People were rocking way back till morning light.
I Man Blak, me da brown, me da white. Nazi Babylon stripe, your man.
MetaMorphOsis, edutainment. Coming to you from Styles FM, from the parish of Portland, in Northeast Jamaica. Featuring your host, Dr. Iman Blak. Tune in, come, listen, learn, engage Dr. Iman Blak. Article reasoning, article teaching. Come, be edutained. MetaMorphOsis.
Each and every Monday from 9 p.m. to 12 midnight.
Time, space, and mind. The basic dimensions of reality. Sound, movement, and thought. The basic responses of I and I. MetaMorphOsis.
Keep listening.
In life I shall be the same. In death I shall be a terror.
I Man Blak, me da brown, me da white. Nazi Babylon stripe, your man.
Guiding I eternally. Guide I. It's the voice that sets me free. Guide I.
Emerging from a cocoon into a caterpillar. From a caterpillar to a butterfly. The metamorphosis is here, is live. MetaMorphOsis.
MetaMorphOsis, word, sound, and power. Music, drumming, current affairs. Everything to grow and lift up your mind. MetaMorphOsis.
No more youths and youths for sale. We get wise and don't decide to change their style. Bobby wrong, keep your empty promises and your crooked smile. MetaMorphOsis, come with your thoughts, change your way of thinking. MetaMorphOsis, the change begins with you.
Men of Tarsus, black men of Ethiopia, Timbuktu, Alexandria gave the light of civilization to this world. Ethiopia shall stretch forth our hands unto God, and princes shall come out of Egypt.
Guide I. It's the voice that sets me free. Guide I.
Good evening, I Man Blak.
Good evening.
This is Pauline from St. Mary. Calling to big you up on your program. I am a disciple. I've been there since almost the inception.
Guide I. It's the voice that sets me free.
I just you may tune into because, me always even watch someone that tell life and stuff, and that I have to see for later. I have to really listen to you first, you know what I mean?
How ma one one machikum bakhna Africa da fa bakhna kida fanya kida farafet one machiki bunjul kida fa bunjul one yande kesawai kida fa bunjul one machiki bunjul kida fa bunjul dafnen rafet yom entamenda ingama dafnen rafet yom entamenda ingara dafnen rafet yom entamenda ingara did you know that's a richer Africa did you know that's a richer Africa did you know said the whole world love it did you know said the whole world love it be proud of your culture be proud of that what you got be proud.
Reflection in red, trade. redemption. And the brother from the crack of dawn, dance dead through the bloody black asphalt streets of the city without any pity. And the people of Wales, King Michael Bernard, down with capitalism. It's written on the wall. Babylon kingdom must fall. Not the dread fall. There can be no peace until there's equal rights and justice.
I pray thee. Why do thee then rage and the people imagine of such vain things? Vast kings of the earth had set themselves on the ruling state council together against the Lord God Rastafari and against his anointed same. Now come let us break their bands of sundown.
MetaMorphOsis.
And cast away the cards from us. The holy that seated in his heaven shall laugh. The Lord God Rastafari shall have them in his region. For then shall he speak unto them in his wrath and vex them in his soul displeasure. For yet have I set thy kings upon the holy mountains of Zion. I will now declare the decree. The Lord God Rastafari hath said unto I and I. Because thou art thy sons this day have I begotten thee. No ask of I and I shall give thee then for thine inheritance. And the uttermost part of the earth for their possession. I shall break them with a rod of iron. Jah shall dash them in pieces like a pot of vessels, I would say. So be wise, therefore we kings be struck to thee for judges of the earth. Serve the Lord God to Rastafari with fear, rejoice with tremble. Kiss I and I the son unless he be younger, but perish from his ways. God. When his wrath is kindled but the liquor. And so blessed be all, blessed be everyone, as I would say. And blessed be all they that put their trust in the true and living
Metamorphosis.
God, Rastafari. That this man shall be like the holy mountains of Zion that cannot be removed but abided forever. Cause so the mountains round about Jerusalem, and so the Lord our God, Rastafari, is round about his people, as I would say. The light of the wicked shall not rest upon the righteous, unless this individual righteous put forth his hands into iniquity. So do good, O Lord God, to Rastafari, unto them that are good, and unto those that are upright in their heart. Cause such as when I turn into his crooked way, he don't say. The Lord God, to Rastafari, shall not turn his back to give the count to the right of his people. And you know, come and make me tell them about the son of color.
Greetings. Eli. Metamorphosis here. I'm your host, I'm Dr. I MAN BLAK. It is my responsibility to guide the proceedings. Metamorphosis is about inquiry, investigation, interrogation, extrication, elevation, and ultimately the liberation of the powerful force that dwells within, that which I and I refer to as the I. So give thanks for another opportunity again to engage with my listeners, and for an opportunity to sit in at Styles FM and to express what is within I and I.
Chant down Babylon. Give thanks and praise. Give thanks and praise. Give thanks and praise. Give thanks and praise to the whole man of creation.
Yes, I. The program is here and it's alive. And the times are critical consistently as the earth is in its own movement and those who control governments and societies are in their own direction. And so it's I and I, the oppressed, I and I, the subjugated, that need to find time outside of the work rhythm, outside of the slave system, to think. Because that truly is the power, the capacity to think. Thinking has been literally removed from the abilities of the black people. And we have been left to believe. To the extent that we begin to deny our own senses. They tell us that seeing is believing. So how do we come to know? With our ears, with our sense of smell, because the sight is one of the more powerful senses. And if that sense cannot bring us to knowledge, then we must refer then to the higher power, which is the brain, and the power of thinking. And through thinking, we come to know. The program in this edition wants to grapple with a very serious dilemma in the lives of black people. It's one that concerns origins, beginnings. It's a question that every child asks himself, herself, and even their parents. How did I get here? Where did this begin? Who was the first? How did it begin? Who was the first? Who was the first man? Who was the first woman? What is the purpose of life? What happens after we die? These questions bottle the mind, but the metamorphosis is undaunted and will dive into the issues within this program. There have been two elements that I have identified that have caused some of the greatest disturbance to black people, especially since we were captured and brought into the West. One of these is called racism, and the other is called colonialism. So I want to examine and explore the roots of this ideological entity called racism, and we'll also explore the structures that come together to create a colonial system. So we have been under colonialism and we have been under racism, and I will explore the genesis. But even critically, and I want to explore what is it that defines our history. How do we become more knowledgeable of our story? Do we depend on the historian? Do we depend on the archaeologist? Do we depend on the anthropologist? Do we depend on the biologist? How do we come to some semblance of understanding as to what makes up our beginning? Well, the metamorphosis will pull upon all of these various disciplines to try to examine where we come from. We are constantly told that if we don't know where we're coming from, we don't know where we're going. And so we're going to explore Genesis. This doesn't have any great deal to do with religion necessarily. It has more to do with origins. And if the historian gets to a point where he has to ask himself or herself about the first man or first woman, is that still history? Or do we now move into the dimension of mythology? So, and I want to explore these arenas, and I want to also touch upon the issue of money, because the society in the most recent exposition has been totally knocked off their feet by the results of the courts in Jamaica, because the courts have released one of the main robbers of money. We're talking about Carlos Hill and the Cash Plus experience, Olint, Worldwise. Why is it that people sink their money into these ventures when money is the root of all evil, or the lack or the love of money? There's a contradiction. So within the metamorphosis, we also want to explore a little bit about this conflict between money and needs. I also want to examine the potential within our society and within our own identities. I want to speak a little bit about class tonight. We have identities that revolve around race and gender, but in this edition now we want to explore what is it that makes up class, and how this issue of class is overwhelming and overpowering, that can lead to acts of injustice and acts of rebellion because of the issue of class. So for this metamorphosis, you're going to need a map, your pen and your paper. You're going to need your Bible, because it is with these tools that we may be able to dig into our own historical self and to arrive at some consensus as to what is it that really makes up our beginning. Where do we really come from? And it's not enough to simply say Africa, because we have to ask the question as to where did the first Africans come from? And it gets a little bit more complicated. So, as I said earlier, do we rely on historians, or do we have to lean on the geographers and the biologists and delve a little bit into mythology? So, stay with it. MetaMorphOsis, Dr. I MAN BLAK.
The peace in high as slowly fade away. No more will I cry, now that I eyes are dry. I've been beaten and robbed of I rights and I loved ones. I bones have grown so tough, no guns or bombs can tear I apart. I eyes get so red from anger and wrath. They lock I away, oh they'll throw I in jail. Sata high, sata high, sata high, sata high, sata high, sata high. Smoke it in their eyes. Sata high, sata high. Eyes get so red from anger and wrath. They lock I away, oh they'll throw I in jail. They say I smoke ganja, some say I smoke Cali weed, but how much do they know what that ganja does for I? Sata high, sata high, sata high, sata high, sata high, sata high. Smoke get in their eyes. Ooh. Oh, what a sweet melody. Sata high, sata high.
All right, Irie, we're there. 954. All right. Now, look, in this program tonight, we're going to open the lines to engage the listening audience. The lines will be open at 11 o'clock. Local numbers is 453-1444. And for the people who are overseas, it's 954 338 7973. Got it right? All right. 7973? Right. 954 338 7973. Okay, so that's for people who are living outside of the island and we want to have their input. At the end of each month, this MetaMorphOsis, the program, the line will be open for half an hour to an hour, that we can get some, I and I can get some feed forward and people can have a chance to make an input into the program. This is the last program for the month, and so that's going to be the sort of rhythm we're going to maintain. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about basic needs, because that is a element of our lives that we have to contend with, especially the people who are locked into the cycle of work and are what you call workers. These are persons who are on the treadmill and they have responsibilities in the form of bills. Now the bills on this plantation is really the punishment that the slaves have to undergo. We are faced with bills, endless amount of bills. So in order to have a peaceful life on this plantation and globally, we have to be able to meet and satisfy what is considered to be your basic needs. But sometimes there is confusion between what are our needs and what are our wants. So the difference between the needs and the wants is what sometimes has to be worked out in order to have some semblance of sanity within the economic system that we must survive in. Now when we talk about needs, it refers to things that you cannot exist without. A need is something that you cannot exist without it. So the two most basic needs are for water and for air. And in reverse order, for air and for water. Not only for humankind, but for the animals and for the plants. So we can see that these are biological needs. Air and water. Once we begin to talk about gatherings of people now into groups, families and communities, etc., the needs are expanded beyond air and water. And I'm going to recommend, as I was saying earlier, that the first need beyond air and water is shelter. But the society has programmed the people to think of food first. And once you think about food first, you become a basic consumer. Your focus is on consumption, consuming, not necessarily producing. If you look at land as a prior need to food, then you put yourself in a position where you can feed yourself. And on that land you can put structures that can make you pretty much feel protected. Because security is another need. A sense of security is a basic need. And of course, you have physical security and we have emotional security. So security is reinforced by having a shelter. When you have your own shelter, you can develop a certain level of security, a certain level of comfort. And these basic needs lead you into a position now where you can begin to exercise the powers that are within you. So there's air and there's water. There is shelter, there's clothing, and there's food. But I want to say to the I and them who out there who are listening, that as much as these are the needs for the physical survival, the society in which we live creates a sort of force that comes between these basic needs. And this force I'm going to call money. Because the plantation society is organized in such a way that in order to secure these basic needs, you have to have money. The only need that we don't need money for at this moment is air. And we don't know how long before we have to begin to buy air. There's a time when you could go to a gas station and get air free. I think that done now. So, speaking to the absolute basics of air, water, shelter, food, and clothing, but those things become literally unattainable in these Western plantation societies without money. So they don't teach us that money is a vital need. They tell us through education and religious training that the love of this vital need is the root of evil. And yet you recognize that without this vital need, you die. You suffer and you die. So we have to change our attitude towards this philosophy that has been telling us that we must actually detest money. Because it's to your own detriment if you hold on to that ideology. Now, I want to speak also now to another need that is biological and oftentimes confused with wants. And I'm going to talk about sex. Because in order for the species to reproduce itself and to maintain its existence, it has to engage in procreation. So at that level of survival, sex is a need to make sure that the race remains in existence. But we're not given that perspective of sex. Oftentimes, a lot of taboos are attached to sex. A lot of boogie-woogie talk is attached to sex. And more often than not, there is no real education surrounding sex. So our population is basically highly confused about this principle called sex. So we have money as a basic need, and there is sex as a biological need. But then sex also has a dimension of it that is called pleasure. And the pleasure now dwells in the realm of wants. Because when you think about it in a very serious way, procreation is not really possible until the bodies become mature. Meaning the female is at a stage where she has mature eggs, where the male is at a level physically where he can produce sperm, and where psychologically both partners are mental and economically in a position to engage in procreation. So in between getting to that phase of being able to procreate, sex becomes a pleasure. It becomes a principle of pleasure. And so therefore we need to have an educated approach to this basic need. Our parents don't tell the children much about what it is. I remember in decades ago, when a child asks where he come from, the mother would say, the stork brought you. You come from a stork. That means some bird bring you and drop you. There was never really any great explanation as to the biological activities and the emotional activities that engage to create another person. So we have an issue now wherein this need has been so abused that it has become a site for struggle. It has become a site of contestation. It has become a site of commercial activity. And as a people, we must pause and reflect on where is it we are really going collectively, and what is it we need to do to rearrange our thinking process that we can put things in a proper perspective. So, in today's economy, sex has become a commercial activity. Sex is now sold and sex is now bought. And in that buy and sell relationship, the communication between males and females have deteriorated significantly. Responsibility for the offsprings have deteriorated to the point wherein the children of sexual relations become pawns for struggle as to who has the power and who owns the children. So we're kind of gone off. And we're beginning to glorify now this activity. That is basically natural. It happens in the animal kingdom. It happens amongst the plants because they have to reproduce. We want to talk about sex amongst what we call man and human beings. It takes on a whole different dimension. And the power struggle now is over oftentimes who controls the sex. Who is the boss? And we're having problems in our people, black people, because my concentration is just within I and I people. In that the issue as to who must initiate sex, the issue as to whether money must be exchanged, the issue as to who wants it more than who, all these things surface. And there's no real site for reasoning or discussion around these issues. But it's becoming more and more critical that we begin to slow down and begin to speak about sex simply in the realm of entertainment and begin to look at the psychological and spiritual aspects behind these processes. Remember that the animals engage in sex for reproduction. I'm not so sure if they have the concept of pleasure within their activity. But within mankind, much has been overplayed in this pleasure dimension to the extent that even recently in Port Antonio here, there was a concert with an artist who's beginning to promote a certain type of sexual activity and behavior in response to what the males used to say and do. So it's a battleground now. And once it turned this delicate activity into a battleground, we're talking about the destruction now of the race. Because we have a power struggle and we have high commercial activity taking place. We have where the offsprings now are just pawns for getting more money. And there's a bag of mix-up and confusion. And I think that those who are in the front line must find a way or find a space where we can have some more constructive reasoning around the power of sex and money. We hear that women must be compensated when they engage in sexual activities with men, as if there is no pleasure for the woman. It seems as if it's about who now has economic power. Because we are of the opinion that in earlier days, because the male was the main earner of money and the head of the household, he would also be dominant in the bedroom because of his economic strength. The economics have been shifting. And with that shift, apparently there's a shift in the dynamics in the bedroom as well. We need to get these reasoning out that we can define how does the race of black people go forward. Because the race is not about sex. And the race is not about money. The race is about posterity. And posterity is all about the children. And they must have a clarity in how we're going to express to our children the value of sex and the power of money and how both of them interact. Because unless we bring these discussions to the front, we're moving into more behaving like the animals rather than behaving like divine beings. Metamorphosis. No, it has come to me that whenever relations run up into problems and the man and the woman have difficulties in whatever issues they're having difficulties in, and they reach a point wherein they can't resolve them difficulty, one of the things that tend to dry up is the sex. And this becomes a tool by the female to fight against the male. So right away, it's like the man is the male is put in a position now where in order to get sex, he have to be more, let us say, cooperative with the woman. Because the impression is that he needs it more than her. And she would tell him that she have a finger on what she can do to herself. And so it's literally a war going on out there. There's a war being fought. And it's kind of disturbing because it all revolves around power and ultimately money. So sex is not just a basic need then. It's a site of power. And it makes you wonder now that if this is the ultimate power that a woman have over a man, it sort of explains in a very strange way why a man having more than one relationship keeps him more balanced. Because you know, when one door is locked, another one is open. And then you really want to know what is the basis of a relationship when sex becomes a tool of demand and fight back. It takes us into the dimension where in Jamaica they have a thing called bun. And each person takes it upon themselves to use sex as a weapon of attack. So let us say, for example, a man has a relationship with a female, and the next female rush him and overpower him and sex him off. The female that he has an initial relationship with tell him say him weak and he should stand strong. But it's more than just standing strong, because there is a certain power in sex. The man is conditioned to believe that he must beg for it. So enough man have to beg for banana, have to beg. And in that begging, he really becomes a beggar. And no man should be put in a position where he have to beg for anything. So it's a serious struggle going on. We have to find a way as a people to address these issues. Why is a man being socialized to think, say, when he engage in sex, work him a work? What kind of work is that? It ought to be, if it's for pleasure, it should be something that both persons relax and full joy. But the man is told that he must work. And he must work hard. And in that working hard, he must inflict pain. And the more pain he inflict, is the more successful he is. All of these things, we have to quash them kind of argument there. And remember that we are no longer enslaved on a plantation. We have to be practicing stud behavior. So it's more behavior that we have to unlearn, more than simply trying to learn new behaviors. There is no work, and there should be no begging. Because, again, it's a position of power versus powerlessness. It's something that black people must sit down and reason out. Because it is at the core of much of our disturbance in relationships. Sex and money. And both of these show up themselves in the society as needs. One need is overwhelming to the other need, which is the money. Because with the money, you can actually acquire all other needs. You can acquire medical services, you can acquire shelter, and you can acquire sex. So we have to be careful now how we balance ourselves. And when we're forming relations, do we form relations for sex, or do we form relations for money? Because oftentimes, these are deeply embedded in the desires of individuals. So, metamorphosis is just kind of skimming the surface a bit. And we'll continue to engage in this sort of exchange. And as I said, the lines are open, 453-1444. You can text, or you can call, or you can WhatsApp, and you can share your point of view. Because the black family is in crisis. And the family at the basic unit is the male and the female. And if we have no understanding about these forces that surround us, then there's greater and greater conflict we're moving into. So we have commercial workers who sell sex. And of course you have buyers. And so often, a lot of these buyers have their own, let us say, women or wives at home. Yet they come to the streets in pursuit of different sex or more sex. We have young boys today who think that being a sex worker is an easy way out. In the previous years, it would be about male and female. Now we have young boys who are exposing themselves to older men with the hope that they will achieve money. So the thing deteriorating. And unless we face it consciously, it will not get any better. So the plantation life, slave life, will not be eased any moment, for any moment, as long as we continue to denigrate certain basic needs and to abuse certain powers that are within nature. So that is it for this moment, wherein we have to have the dialogue and the reasoning. How do we value ourselves? How do we value our relations? What is the value we put on sex? What is the value that we put to money? Do you do anything for money? Or are there moral constraints that will help to guide our behavior? It's important and it's critical, and we must think it through. Metamorphosis.
If you really love Jah, seek him for yourself. And don't seek man. And flesh will feel you. Hold your head up high and be sure. Dirty capitalist, I have done sleep with them. Chronic economic disease. I know I'll give it the cure to come. Them no care use, them no willing to share. No, without a demand there's no supply. Here you, so not slave out yourself. Them don't give a heck about us. Them don't give a heck about us. All them sit down in a parliament every day and a talk. Them don't give a heck about us. Mr. Government don't give a heck about us. Them don't give a heck about us. All the pastor they pop up with every Sunday and I preach him. Don't give a heck about us. And we feel the pain for them capital gain. We can't get visa every day. Them take plane like taxes. And happy with tax and fi pay. For every mistake and every game where you play. You waste the money go buy out a many and left one people in a tax jeopardy. You split the motor, you so selfish. I like how you give a 3,000 acre to China. The road's accessible and all it's really nice. You put people on a level, make it seem like we are rise. But why you want people have to pay the price? The people ask answer if you hear the voices. We are cry out every day, Shelly can't take the pressure on a church, we go pray. Before pastor pray, he might try make a way to see if him can get little Shelly mind straight. She said them don't give a heck about us.
No, because of money and the divide and rule principle, we have established in Jamaica and in other places what we call classes of people. And oftentimes class is directly related to the amount of money that you have. Now, we don't have our own printry. We don't print our own money. And so in order for black people to really achieve money in a legitimate way, you are forced to involve in what they call job slavery, wage slavery. You have to become a wage earner. The money that we get from our wages are able to just about allows us to maintain some basic needs in place, like the rent, the light, the water. Some of it goes to transportation to take us back and forth from the slave. But it hardly has anything left for saving, and more so not much left for investment. So you're sort of encouraging and you're developing a class of people that are basically poor. Because it is the money and lack of money now that makes people really poor. And then at the other extreme, you have those who have access to this money in abundance. Oftentimes, these are the descendants of the plantation owners. Oftentimes, these are descendants of the dominant class that control this plantation from its early inception. And these people put themselves in a category that is called rich. And so this divide between rich and poor is a reality in the society. And those who are in the category of rich find that they are also protected by the law. And their protection comes from being able to finance themselves through legal situations. There's no clearer example than Carlos Hill, who was at the center of a major robbery of millions and millions and millions of people's money. A lot of those people were working people who were in the category of poor. But because of his level of money and his connection to the society at the higher level, he was able to free himself. So this rich and poor category, the black people need to recognize that we need to break this bond of being poor. Much of it is in the way of how we think. And the thinking process is inspired by the education system and by the church. We have people who are highly educated and they consider themselves to be not poor, but they're not rich. Sometimes they call themselves simply wealthy. People can be wealthy culturally. You can be wealthy intellectually. But you can be still poor because you don't have any money. So it doesn't matter after a while how you look at it, from which angle. One thing is certain, that in these Western capitalist societies, it is money that makes the mayor run. So there's rich and there's poor. And the Christian scripture tells you that the rich man cannot get into heaven. Christian scripture tells the poor man that his best chance is not in this here and now, but in the by and by, in the heaven. And so psychologically, we are not conditioned to gather money. We are told that we cannot take it to the ways. But that's not important. The important thing is having enough left to even take care of your own funeral. It's important to have enough to even take care of your own children if you are not here. So we have to break down this psychological feeling of just wanting to be comfortable. We are still afraid of using the word rich. We think that when you're rich, you become the target for others. But you're also a target for others when you are poor. So why not strive to achieve much in money? It is not a sin to have much money. It's all about how you use your money. And if you're going to be wicked and evil because you have money, it's because you're wicked and evil long time. So if we drive these fears out of our brain and begin to move towards organizing ourselves where we can have money in surplus, and this way we're in a position to defend ourselves. As the same scripture tells you, money is a sound defense. So we must abandon the fear of having plenty money. It can't be a worse condition than having no money at all. Because when you have no money, you begin a downward spiral. You begin to borrow, then you begin to beg, and ultimately you may begin to steal. And it's the same system of what they call justice that's going to hold on to you when you get caught stealing. When the man who's rich gets caught in any scenario, he's able to finance himself with high-powered lawyers who work the system and are able to free that man. So let us not be fearful of money. The love of money is not the issue. It is the lack of money. And so as you rise to go into your work rhythm, bear in mind that there is nothing wrong with having an abundance of money. The concept of comfortable is an illusion, because comfortable really means having enough money to achieve all your basic needs, which includes your shelter, your food, your clothing, your medicine, your ability to travel, your ability to provide an education. All of these things require money. So we're going to abandon the fear and we're going to move forcefully towards achieving and accumulating and acquiring money right here on earth.
Build as depot, everybody go a build as depot. Portland #1 hardware that's a build as depot. You want to fix up your yard, builders. You could be living abroad, builders. Hurricane season come, builders. To make your roof blow down, builders. We have the best pricing, builders. And the best parking, builders. Harbor Dash we are waiting, and we are carrying the swing.
Builders Depot, right at Industrial Estate Longwall in Barnes Bay. I call them at 715-3128 or 284-3337. Check them out. Architects, draftsmen, and surveyors, get your drawings printed in high-quality professional standards. We can satisfy your printing needs. Whether it is for presentation to your clients or for submitting building and subdivision application, make it VJ Printing Services. Whether drawing by hand or with computer-aided softwares, we will plot your negatives and print the copies as you need. We do high-quality white paper printing that is water-resistant and never fades, unlike traditional blueprint. For more information, call VJ Printing at 893-2266.
John no star. You know, Stefan, what everybody a talk about this Come On Me Yard song with CG. And what the fans them really think about that song, yeah?
CG and Stefan, they may try to call the phone and I want answer. But the actor never have nothing done the camera munch fan. See the right on my phone, I'll want charge. Later still.
That now play. CG direct Sunday night. I lie. This I got cuss.
Oh my God, this CG song, Come On Me Yard, it is unbelievable. This is what I play every day because I cannot get my girlfriend to stop Come On Me Yard.
Yo, brother CG, you see that Stop Come On Me Yard song there? It bad, yo.
Forget about that. Listen to that one, yeah. People, check out the brand new CG, Come On Me Yard. Now available on iTunes and all leading digital stores. For bookings, contact 876-844-6531 or rudelikedat@gmail.com. Calm is the key.
Boundbrook Hilltop Guest House, conveniently located at 15 Boundbrook Crescent, Port Antonio. For a large space of single and double rooms at reasonable rate, Wi-Fi, cable TV, breakfast order, 24-hour security, CC cameras, parking, snack bar and lounge. Beautiful scenery of the Caribbean Sea. We're willing to assist with additional accommodation, such as fridge in your room, coffee machine, and so much more. Boundbrook Hilltop Guest House, proud sponsor of the MetaMorphOsis with Dr. Iman Blak, live on Styles FM, Mondays, 9 p.m. to midnight. Call Boundbrook Hilltop Guest House at 715-1644.
MetaMorphOsis continuing. This is a segment that is used to look into our story. And this time now is going to be a very different perspective. We are quite familiar with this particular theme song called Historian by the great Maragini. And by now, most persons are aware, whether through history or whether through religious scripture, of the importance of ancient Egyptian society. Now, it is the historians and the archaeologists that have been working, digging, searching for ruins, searching for evidence of things gone by. And so we become sort of familiar and comfortable with the research findings of these scientists. But I want to go beyond the scientists. I want to go beyond the historian. And perhaps we have to enter the land of the mythologists. So we know about, through anthropology, we know about the finding of fossils, of bones. And the literature tells us that the most ancient fossil of a, let us say, a living person was found in Africa. And they have scientific ways of dating their findings through a thing called carbon testing. So we arrive at the dates that are phenomenon to the ordinary mind. We hear about fossils that were 2 million years old, 3 million years old. But then there is a book that has been imposed on the African people. It's a book called the Book of the Genesis. And this is a book that most persons make reference to, even subconsciously, when we talk about origins. Origin of the species, origins of man, origins of the earth, origins of our civilization. Now in this book is one chapter that I want to zero in on. The book of Genesis, one chapter. And it is the first chapter, chapter 1. And this chapter 1 is recorded in the brains or the subconscious minds of nearly everybody who is exposed to Bible, or everybody who has been exposed to Christianity, or everybody who has been exposed to Islam. All persons generally who have been exposed to monotheism, the belief in one God, have been some way, somehow exposed to this book of Genesis. The word suggests a beginning, the Genesis. Now, before we can even read or write as individuals, the book of Genesis, chapter 1 and chapter 2 is impressed in our subconscious brain. And by the age of 3, by the time we spend our first 36 months on this earth, that story has become a fixture in our mentality. It almost helps to form our foundation when we realize that a child learns nearly all that the child needs to learn in the first 3 to 5 years. So I'm saying all of that to enter into this chapter 1. And this chapter 1 now goes beyond the realm of history. Because the historians will tell you that history really begins when man could write. And when man could do recordings, that's when we begin to talk about history. Before man could write, they call it prehistory. But the Genesis chapter 1 goes even before that. It goes into before even man was even created. And as I said in the initial statements, that most persons are perplexed at a certain age because the questions come to them, where them come from, where everything come from, where the sky come from, where the moon come from, where everything come from. What was first? And there's a tendency to ask a question about the first. What was the first that? What was the first that? We say to ourselves, everything must have a first. And then ultimately we say everything must have a beginning. So once we accept these basic ideas about things having a beginning, and once we are given a book now that's going to speak to the beginning, it just fits in line. But I'm suggesting to the idea that very rarely, if ever, do we ever really examine that book that tells us about the beginning. We hear about it. We're told about it in Sunday school. It is mentioned in the church. But how many of us have ever really sat down as adults and read that first chapter? And that first chapter goes beyond history now. Because that first chapter takes you into an era when there were no men, when there were no people, there was nobody to write. And so I want to look into this chapter very carefully to see if we can really find out where I come from, really, as African people, as black people, where we come from. There was a European scientist who was also overwhelmed and preoccupied with the Genesis and the origins. And his research took him around the world, studying plants, studying animals, doing that type of research. His name was Charles Darwin. And out of his curiosity and research, he came up with his own theory of the origin of the species. Now, his theory did not coincide with what is in the book of Genesis, chapter 1. And he was roundly condemned and roundly booed and literally ostracized from the intellectual community because his findings didn't match up with what was written in the chapter 1 of the book of Genesis. I know, as an African, as a black man, want to venture into the concept of the origins of the species. So it's gonna force I to examine not just history, but mythology. Because the mythology is what is the explanation of man for things that he himself was not even there to record. It is really grounded much in his imagination. And the imagination of man is mighty, because the brain is a mighty organ. So Genesis chapter 1 is what I want to speak to. And when you talk about beginning, we have to talk about the concept of time. When we talk about creation, we have to talk about space. So we have these two dimensions we have to contend with, time and space. And the book rightfully begins by saying, in the beginning. And because 99% of the people are of the view that everything have a beginning, then why not accept what is in this book? So we have to realize also that these writings are not as ancient as Africa. It's not as ancient as China nor India. These writings are recent, very, very recent, when we consider the age of the earth itself. Now, the people who are locked into Christianity are led to believe that the earth is 6,000 to 7,000 years old. And because of their perception of time, everything from the beginning had to happen within the last 6,000 to 7,000 years. Now, people who are engaged in scientific analysis, the geographers, the oceanographers, the anthropologists, use different techniques to measure time. So it's become a complex issue. But the Christian Bible, in its chapter 1, sort of simplifies a beginning. And that's what's put into the brains of our people from day one. That by the time you get to school, to get the formal education, there's already in your brain a concept of time and history and a beginning. So in the beginning, according to the book of Genesis, God created the heaven and the earth. Now there are those who will say, beginning of what? And then the response may be, well, the beginning of everything. The beginning of time. We must question what is time? What is time? Can time be created? Can time come to an end? The dimension of time tends to answer the question of when. So if you ask the question when, you expect an answer that is related to time. If you ask the question where, then the answer is related to the concept of space. So the child's mind will ask, when did this begin? And that book will say, well, in the beginning. And then the book tells you that there is a force that is now responsible for the beginning. This force is referred to as the God. And so because the mind understands that there is an implication to every idea, if there is a beginning, then the mind implies that there is a beginner, a starter, a force that is responsible for the beginning. So we're going to accept that we can continue with the reasoning. We're going to accept that there is a force that is responsible for a beginning. We're also going to attach to that force an element that is called intelligence. So let us assume for the reasoning that there's an intelligent force responsible for the beginning. So chapter 1 tells us that in the beginning, this force created the heavens and the earth. It doesn't tell us what created that force itself. It doesn't tell us that that force also has a beginning. And we are told in a very subtle way never to question that force. We are told not to ask questions about that force because that is not our business. Well, let it be that way for a minute. So there is a force responsible for the beginning. And the book of Genesis now begins to describe the activities of this force. And it tells you in chapter 1 that the earth was created along with the heavens. And that the earth was formless and void. And that there was darkness upon the surface of the deep. And that the spirit of this original force moved over the waters. And now we go into the beginning of what people consider to be now the creation. So we're going to acknowledge, according to the book, the existence of this starting force. And we're going to look into the sequence of this creation story. The general overview is that it took 7 days for the creation to be completed. So one of the first things we have to decipher is just what is meant by a day. What exactly is a day in the concept of this creation? Within the societies that we live in today, a day is classified as a 24-hour period. As a matter of fact, a day is a 12-hour period. And the other 12-hour period is called night. So if you combine the day and the night, we have a 24-hour period. And in our language, we call the 24 hours one day. But we have to stop and check now and reflect on this whole concept of a day. Because in these modern times, we arrive at a day based upon one rotation of the earth. So when the earth makes one complete rotation, in today's times, we call it a day. But when we reflect into this period of the beginning, it is quite likely that a day will be much, much greater than one rotation of the earth. And there's evidence to justify that position. Because when we examine now what happens in each day, we realize that it really requires more time for these events to unfold. So we hear that a day in the sight of that creating force could be 10,000 years. That a day in the sight of the Almighty God could be 1,000,000 years. And if we use our intelligence to really examine the concept of a day in the creation story, it is definitely not 24 hours. So the word day could easily be translated to era, E-R-A. It could be easily translated to an eon or an age. So the time becomes more expanded when we begin to open up our intelligence to fit in this creation story. And we are told that in the first day that the God proceeded to let there be light. And there came light. And after that the God saw that the light was good, the God created a division, a separation between the light and the darkness, and called one day and called the other night. So this is the beginning now of the sequence of creation, which our historians cannot be responsible for recording because there is no human beings here. There is no man. So we have to depend upon our mythologies to help us to come to some understanding as to what is taking place. We are told that in the second day, or in the second period, the second era of creation, that water and land is separated. And so now we have the existence of oceans and we have the existence of land. The earth is composed of 2/3 water on the surface and the next 1/3 is land. The land is really all about the continents. And on the continents, we have vast amounts of land space. So there's a sequence of events that are occurring in the book of Genesis, chapter 1. So there's land and there's sea. And in the third era, we hear about the emergence of life in the sea, life in the oceans, sea life, fish, and in real time, these life forms could never develop in a 24-hour period. The whale is the largest mammal in the ocean. There are millions and millions of species of fish. So these life forms would require thousands of years for their own development or evolution. So one of the first things we have to do is break out of that concept of a day equal 24 hours in the creation and realize that these are eras, these are periods, because it requires time for these life forms to develop. And the sequence takes on a certain level of intelligence. It takes on a certain order. Because in order for there to be life on the surface, there must be the existence of trees, of plants. And plants don't grow in 24 hours. And plants don't create oxygen in 24 hours. We're talking about another set of thousands of years. Enough time for an atmosphere to be created. The proper mixture of hydrogen and oxygen and the various gases that create an atmosphere. So if you are consciously thinking about it, by the time we get into the third period, we're talking about maybe 3 million years. But our brains have been so locked into the concept of the day that for many it is very difficult to expand that day into an era, into an eon, into an age. But we have to look at the concept of time and look at intelligence behind this design. So we're realizing now that this concept of 7 days is not like what we call 1 week. We may be talking about 7 million years. Because these processes do not occur overnight. And the intelligence that is designing these kind of processes would know that. So there is a concept of time that we have to revisit. That within the concept of creation, time doesn't run on a 24-hour man-made clock. Time really moves through seasons. There is the winter and the summer and the fall and the spring. And those cycles repeat themselves unending. And this has been the nature of creation. The cycle doesn't stop there. Because we hear that now, in the fourth period, there is a introduction of stars and things to make the time more manageable and measurable. So we have sea life, we have land life. There's an age when the life on the surface is all about reptiles. A reptilian era, where the life moves from the sea to the land, where the amphibious animals come into existence, animals that can live both in water and live on the land. These are taking place over thousands and thousands of years. So when the geologists measure the age of the earth, they arrive at billions of years, which many biblical minds cannot absorb because they are locked into this idea that the world is 6,000 years old. Most recently, meaning like last week, there was a report of fossils being discovered in Greenland. And these fossils now represent the oldest fossils found on Earth. And they're dated 3.7 billion years. It might sound baffling to the brains who locked into this 24-hour concept of a day. So the genesis, that we are reading could be vast in this concept of time than we have been told to imagine. So once you see that there's a sequence, there's a scientific sequence to the evolution of the planet. Because the planet, in order to obtain and sustain life, must first of all have water. It has to have plant life. It has to have oxygen in the atmosphere. It has to have vegetation that the animals can eat, that photosynthesis can occur, and that the cycle of oxygen and carbon dioxide, the intake and the outtake, that these things will be occurring on the planet's surface. Now we come to the critical stage, because we have been describing an earth that has no man on it. It has fish, it has birds, it has plant life, but there is no man. Now we get to the critical phase of this creation story. And we are told that in the 6th period, the Creator God, through the power of word, will bring into conception and bring into being the force that is called man. Now this 6th period, again, I'm suggesting to the item now, doesn't represent 24 hours. It represents thousands and thousands of years. So in Genesis 1:26, verse 26, is at this point now that we are told that the Creator God will bring into being the being called man. And it says, and God went on to say, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have in subjection the fish of the sea, and the flying creatures of the heavens, and the domestic animals, and all the earth, and every moving animal that is moving upon the earth. This is Genesis 1, chapter 6. It's the first time that we are hearing about the Creator God in a plural context. Because the God is recorded as saying, let us make man. Now many people have been confounded with this concept of us. That the us would say, we shall make man in our likeness, and speak to man in the plural by saying, let them have dominion over the fish and the earth. So at this stage now, I have to think quite seriously that the God that is responsible for this creation is a plural concept. That the term really ought to be God's. Some way, somehow the S drop off. And it should be the gods that are speaking. And the gods said, let us make man in our image. It also suggests that man is equivalent to them. And it's reinforced in chapter 7. And the God proceeded to create the man in his image. He created him, male and female, he created them. Now, this man that is being created in the 6th period, who is this man? Who are they? Who are these males and females that are being created in this 6th era? Not only were they created in the 6th period, they were given instructions. In same chapter 1, verse 28, it said, and the God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and become many and fill the earth. Now, there's only one way that them could multiply. It's through sexual relations. It's through procreation. In the same way the birds and the bees and the fish and the trees would reproduce themselves. So these people, we're going to call them people. This capital MAN, which is not a male, is not a female, but is a collection of males and females. So we can simply call them a race. This race of man that is being spoken about in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 28. Who are these people? And if the period is valued in terms of thousands of years, it means that these people were on the earth for thousands of years. In the sixth era. And in these thousands of years, it is quite obvious that that is enough time to spread out, to multiply, and to replenish the earth. So the archaeologists and the historians come into play now, because they now must search and find who are these people? Which land did these people occupy? Because there is land. Where is the original land for these original people? And the Bible doesn't speak about a single male or a single female. It speaks about them, and with them being given the instructions to go out and multiply and replenish the earth. So I say no, that in the sixth period of creation, people were made, original people. And I'm suggesting to the animal that these original people were no different in their ability than the plants to survive under the sun. In the same way, the plants could be defined as species. And amongst the plants, the most important plants were the green plants. The plants that had pigment in their cells. The plants that had pigment in their leaves. These are the most important plants on the earth, because it is these plants that are coordinated to work with the sun to produce oxygen and food. Well, the people, those original people in that sixth period, also had pigment, also were connected to the sun. So these people were sun people. And the pigment in their skin was melanin. So on the sixth day, the people of melanin were created. Because only the people of melanin that could survive under the sun. And so for thousands of years, melanin people walked this planet. And they went out and they multiplied all over the face of the earth. Africa, Asia, China, North America, South America. These are land masses where the archaeologists and the geologists are now finding evidence that melanin people occupy these lands for thousands and thousands of years. So I should never be confused about our genesis. I should not be confused about our origins. And we have to go to the mythology, which goes beyond the history. And the mythology tells us that on the sixth era, the voice of the Almighty uttered, and the voice said, "Let us make man." And it was very obvious from the literature that the Almighty represented more than one. So this plural force, and if you explore the creation now, the two most consistent principles within life are the male and the female principle. It's manifested in the fish, in the plants, in the animals. It's manifested in man. It's also a reflection of the likeness and image of that creator force. So the creator force were both male and female, collectively, us. So it is that us that has created us, who the scripture called them, original people, the melanin people. The story continues that after those thousands of years in that sixth era, by the time we get into the seventh era, the creator force is satisfied and decides to take a rest. So for thousands of years, the creators rested while man became the dominant force. Males and females, developing culture, developing societies, developing intelligence and knowledge. So I'm going to pause there to reflect on the 6 days, the 6 eras, the 6 eras of creation, the 7th era of rest, and the end to the creation with original people all over the earth, males and females, pigmented people, people of melanin, living in Africa, living in China, living in India, the melanin-based people, and the creation comes to a close in the 7th era. But the most baffling part of the story is that we are given a next chapter. And in that next chapter now, we are told about a being called Adam and a clone called Eve. We are left to wonder, what really is that Eve and Adam? The melanin people should all ask the question, knowing that I and I have been in existence from the 6th era, long before the creation ended. Who is it that has now been created at the end of creation? MetaMorphOsis.
Economic liberation is a duty I owe to posterity. Great Zimbabwe stands, ancient rock solid firm. Come now, Draco go down. Great Zimbabwe walls, great Zimbabwe walls, great Zimbabwe walls, great Zimbabwe walls. When they saw Zimbabwe walls, they said it was the foundation. They said it was the Syrian. They said it was the Chinese. When they saw Zimbabwe wall, they said it came from the Iberian. We know it is 100% African. Yaga yo, naga naga na Zimbabwe walls, great Zimbabwe walls, great Zimbabwe walls, great Zimbabwe walls. So who your Vasco de Gama be? So who Prince Henry the Navigator be? So who was yours? Sir Walter Raleigh. So who was Amerigo Vespucci? Some kind of Johnny come lately, talking about them make some kind of discovery. I man is the living anthropology. I man is the living archaeology.
So Genesis 1, chapter 31 concludes. It says, after that, God saw everything he had made. And look, it was very good. And there came the evening. And there came to be the morning, a 6th day. Thus the heavens and the earth and all their army came to their completion. And by the 7th period, God came to the completion of his work that he had made. And he proceeded to rest on the 7th from all his work that he had made. And God proceeded to bless the 7th era and make it Sabbath, make it sacred. Because on it, he has been resting from all of his work. And God had created for the purpose of making. So as far as the book of Genesis is concerned, it took 7 periods to complete the creation. And it is the 6th period that I and I is focusing on. The period when man was brought into being. And this man wasn't a male. This man was a race of males and females that were made in the image and likeness of the gods. They were the descendants of the gods. And so we have to know ourselves. We have to know ourselves now as the descendants of the gods. For people who accept this book of creation story and hold it as the truth, you have to accept what it says if you think it's the truth. And it does tell us that in the 6th period of creation, melanin man was made. And the man in this instant is not a male. It's a race of people. And it's this race from which all other races emerge. The Indian, the Oriental, as it come out of the melanin man. Their pigment has been changed because of climatic conditions. But culturally and psychologically, they are very, very similar to the people of melanin, who we call black people. So black people must begin to reconstruct the essence of themselves by setting themselves firmly into a beginning that has a genesis within the 7th period of creation. The great error has happened by us taking ourselves out of the 6th day of creation and placing ourselves now within the context of a being now called Adam and another being called Eve. These are deviations. These occur outside of the 7th period of creation. And this is the beginning of our problems. Because these two created beings are the beginning of confusion in the earth. It's the beginning of incest. It's the beginning of murder. Beginning of death and envy. And once I and I accept that as our beginning, then there is no end except destruction for I and I. If we don't know how we get here and where we're coming from, we're bound to doom. So it is imperative that we revisit the concept of the creation story. It's important that we relocate ourselves within the 7 periods of creation and then take a look from that inside, outside. Look what has happened outside of those 7 periods of creation and realize that we have been given now another story. A story about a being now being made out of dirt. A being who will find a companion made out of a bone, out of its rib. This is not a divine creation now. This is a manifestation of man's interference with nature. So once we begin to reject that concept of our beginning, we begin to liberate ourselves. Free ourselves from certain distress and dis-ease. Because the story of Eve and Adam is one of pure destruction. And ultimately you realize that if you follow that Eve and Adam story, then you begin to realize where Cain found a wife. Because I and I have been on the planet for thousands of years before this creation of Eve and Adam. Because in the 6th period of creation, which lasts for thousands of years, the melanin man was walking on the earth. So it's very easy to recognize now where this Cain character could run away out of the garden and find himself a wife. This woman had to have a mother. This woman had a culture. She came from a society. She was living in a city. Who built those cities? It is I and I. It is the melanin people who have been on the earth for thousands of years before Eve and Adam were created. And they were created beings. One out of experimentation, the other out of cloning. And it is this beginning that has led black people to their own destruction. Because we are of the view that we are now descendants of this Eve and Adam. That we are descendants of an incestuous family. Of a family that engage in murder, jealousy, envy, all the sins that are considered to be deadly sins comes out of this Eve and Adam conception. So we have to reverse the curse and reclaim the Genesis that is befitting to melanin people. We are descendants of the gods and the goddesses. There have always been female entities. The principle of the male and female has always existed. So it's difficult to separate ourselves from the feminine at the level of the deity. But within the concept of Eve and Adam, everything has been rewritten. And now we begin to worship a male concept of a God. And this God is a jealous God. So jealousy becomes a feature of the God of Adam. And jealousy walks hand in hand with envy. And if you really examine the history and the stories now of the God of Adam and Eve, it's all about murder and genocide and death and destruction and war. So we have to free ourselves from that meditation in order to also find the balance amongst our own selves. We have to free ourselves from the Eve and Adam story. We have to reconnect ourselves to that sixth day, that sixth period, that sixth era, when males and females, in their strength and power, manifested melanin and were able to build societies, use technology, able to build pyramids, and realize that the same scripture speaks about the giants that were in the earth. So it's quite likely that the melanin people were giants. Yeah, giants. They have found some statues and some heads in Central America of some giants that could really be the actual size of the Africans and the black people at that time. And we can't even speak of Africa, because that's a term that was applied to the land by the Romans. And they were simply trying to describe the people who were black-faced. So we have been black people, melanin people, long before we got the name Africans. We have been black people long before we got the name Egyptians. So the blackness is the foundation. The melanin is the key. It links up with the pigmentation in the skin. It is no different from the pigmentation in the green plant. And so the green plant and the melanin man and the sun creates a trinity. We have to reconstruct our own genesis for us to really be able to go forward. Because if you don't know where you're coming from, you certainly can't direct where you're going. Metamorphosis. The lines are open. 453-1444. Text, call, WhatsApp. International 954-338-7973. Link up.
You to my sisters, he made our creation. Don't want no destruction, oh yeah. So don't mash up creation. Build it up and save our nations. Let me tell you, don't mash up creation. Build it up and save our nations. Man to man remains unjust. You just can't check for who to trust. Searching through the devil's band. You must can't find at least one good man. So don't mash up creation. Build it up and save our nations. up and save our nation. Traveling here and traveling there, you meet a lot of strange folks everywhere. Not seeing in and seeing out, you got to hold on firm and try to find out. So don't mash up creation, build it up and save our nations. Let me tell you, don't mash up creation, build it up and save our nations. Traveling here and traveling there, you meet a lot of strange folks everywhere. Not seeing in and seeing out, you got to hold on firm and try to find out. So don't mash up creation, build it up and save our nations. Let me tell you, don't mash up creation, build it up and save our nations. Please don't mash up creation. We've got to build up our nations. Please don't mash up creation. We've got to build up our nations.
Planning a party, club night out, stage show, a gospel concert, or even a business sales event? Let Styles FM be a part of your promoting tool. Take advantage of our low-priced promotion packages with commercials, interviews, giveaways, reviews, and much more. We have special offers when you mix and match and bundle your options. Contact us at 876-286-9216 or 439-5160. Styles FM for the most effective way to exploit your marketing dollar.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You want it, now you got it. Styles FM Fan Fusion Party Episode 4, Mixed Intoxication. Saturday, July 8, 2017 at the Bayview Villas, waterfront property, Dolphin Bay, Port Antonio, Jamaica. Come hear your Styles FM DJs juggling retro hits, retro Gunya style from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Admission 500 pre-sold, 600 at the gate with flyer, 700 without flyer. Party starts at 7 p.m. sharp. Listen to Styles FM for ticket outlets or call 286-9216. Fan Fusion Party, Mixed Intoxication. Dress tropically elegant. Must be 18 years and older to enter. ID required. Drink responsibly.
1, 2, 3.
For the best quality in sound reinforcement and backlining, Native Audio. We have professional engineers with over 20 years of experience. So call us and we'll take care of your parties, wedding receptions, barbecues, conferences, and small stage shows. Crystal clear sound, Native Audio. Our prices are the best. Call us at 871-5212. That's 871-5212. Native Audio. We make your events audible.
Boundbrook Hilltop Guest House, conveniently located at 15 Boundbrook Crescent, Port Antonio. For a large space of single and double rooms at reasonable rate, Wi-Fi, cable TV, breakfast to order, 24-hour security, CC cameras, parking, snack bar and lounge. Beautiful scenery of the Caribbean Sea. We're willing to assist with additional accommodation, such as fridge in your room, coffee machine, and so much more. Boundbrook Hilltop Guest House, proud sponsor of the MetaMorphOsis with Dr. Iman Blak, live on Styles FM, Mondays, 9 p.m. to midnight. Call Boundbrook Hilltop Guest House at 715-1644.
MetaMorphOsis continuing about what's up here from the mountains of Georgia. I think it's Grace. She said, man should be able to ask and not beg. And more time, if you have good communication, you don't need to ask either. It just happened. She's speaking about sexual relations between male and female. Yeah, it's just a vibration that you don't even have to be in the mood. Once there's a level of communication and understanding, you just make sure your partner is satisfied, whether you feel up to it or not. It just becomes natural. So I totally endorse that perspective. It shouldn't be a sort of ransom situation when there is open communication. It's about feelings and vibrations. I agree, 100%, Grace.
In a segregation, oh so long, so rise and shine as the morning sun that surrounds you. It's international morality time, where mankind must be born anew. So rise and shine for the sake of the younger generation, putting hearts and minds to brotherhood and unity. We've been down in the valley much too long. We've been down in a poverty oh so long, yeah. We've been down in captivity much too long. We've been down in humility and oh so long.
Yeah, we have to rise. We have to rise as a people. Rise above the limitations that we set amongst ourselves in our sexual relations. We have to rise above the meditation that we put ourselves in as it relates to our beginning, our genesis, our genetics. Because genesis is like genes is, it's like two words, genes, is. They say genesis. It all comes down to the power of our genes, our genetics. That should be probably a better name for the book, the genetics. Well, this view has been promoted for quite a long time. This concept of a creation within a certain amount of eras. But within the European thinking, there was a man born 1809. 1809. Mean just ready. He died in 1882. So he lived for 73 years. And within his 73 years of existence, he made a serious contribution to the literature as it relates to Genesis and the beginnings. This man is Charles Robert Darwin, an Englishman, a naturalist, a biologist. And Charles Darwin was not convinced by what the book of Genesis in King James Version had to say about the beginning and the genesis of man and mankind. So he decided to pursue a level of research to arrive at his own understanding. He was a naturalist, a geologist, and a biologist. And he's best known for his contribution to the science that is called evolution. Now, when people hear the word evolution, a lot of people automatically think about man coming from apes. And that man is a descendant of the animal kingdom. And Darwin also made a suggestion in his findings. So remember now, he's a geologist studying the earth and its rocks and how the earth is made up. He's also a biologist studying how things work at the biological level. And he did a lot of research in plants. But these are the life forms that are obviously predate any consciousness called man. And so Darwin and his research and the concept of evolution needs a little exploration right here. Because within the book of Genesis, that same biblical construct that we just went through, within that there is a process called evolution. Because the planet itself undergoes evolution. Evolution simply means a change from one state of existence to another state. And they usually expect the change to take it to a higher level of function. So Darwin's exploration into animals and plants led him to the concept that it is out of the animal kingdom that man evolved. So Darwin was unwilling to work with the notion of a divine force that used words, sound, and power to bring the divinity called man into conception. Darwin challenged that whole idea, and he brought into being a sort of scientific approach to trying to explain the genesis or the genetics of man. But we must bear in mind now that this is not a black man or an African doing the research. This is a European. And it does make a difference, because the perspective now is what is going to be different. And so what Darwin proposed is that man, as he conceptualized man, wasn't a divine being. That man ultimately was a evolution or an extension of the ape kingdom, the orangutans. Darwin looked out into the animal kingdom and looked for the animal that looked closest to man. And the closest looking animal to man is the orangutan. The orangutan stands 6 feet tall with long arms and long legs. The orangutan does not have the brain of a man because the orangutan is coming from the monkey family called the primates. And Darwin theorized that the primates evolved from Australopithecus to Homo erectus, and from Homo erectus to Homo sapien, and Homo sapien to human beings. Now, as far as I am concerned, that evolutionary process is quite fitting to the European. But it has a problem when African people try to fit themselves into it. Because when we examine our DNA and our collective unconscious memories, we can't find any monkey. We don't have nothing resonating us that gives us a feeling that we're coming from an animal kingdom. But Darwin tried to insist that the human being is an evolved product from the animal kingdom. And what melanin people must realize that there's nothing wrong if Darwin said that. Just don't put yourself into that picture. Just don't try to fit yourself into the animal kingdom, because I and I have no animal kingdom in our genesis. Darwin tried to insist that the ape is a link between the animal kingdom and the human being. And the human being now is a different concept than the man that was manifested in the 6th day of creation. Because in that book of Genesis, there is no concept of a human. It's all about man, males and females. So the human being is not man. The human being claims descendancy from the animal kingdom. And the human being is filled with animal behavior. Darwin suggested that the human being is the highest form of animal on the planet. And he could very well be right. But that does not change the reasoning about the divinity of man. So Darwin was criticized and ostracized because he challenged the creation that was part of the Bible. And in today's world, there are many melanin-based people who reject the concept of a divine creation and accept that they are descendants of animals. Well, you know, I Man Blak that out totally. Because I is no animal. I is man. You have mankind, which is a kind of man. Call them humans. The orangutan that I spoke about earlier. The orangutan is not black, you know. The orangutan does have black hair. But if you shave an orangutan, he looks like a human. He looks like a European. Looks like a Caucasian. So we have to be very, very wise now in our discernment. And rather than try to fit into Darwin's theory, we should realize that it's a European construct, and it does explain the behavior of the Europeans. Sigmund Freud reinforced Darwin's theory by theorizing that the human being has an aspect of his psychology that is animal-driven. He called it the id. And he further went on to construct another aspect of the human being that he called the ego, which is that selfish, personal, me, all about me. And he topped it off with another concept called the superego. And the superego is supposed to represent the conscience of human society. So Europeans have all right to construct their own structures that suit them. It is I and I as black people must realize that we don't fit into it. So yes, they tell us that there are two kingdoms of life, plants and animals. And so because of that teaching now, most black people don't see themselves as a plant. So they, by natural omission, they end up calling themselves animals. But I and I is no animal. The animals were manifested in about the third period of the creation. Animals. Land animals and sea animals. I and I is no animal product. And once you begin to reject that type of theorizing, you begin to transform yourself. Because there are really three forms of, well, it's really four major forms of life. There is the minerals, there are plants, there are animals, and there is man. It is the Europeans who have been confusing the issue by telling us that we all of us come from apes, and we're all humans. Well, as I said to them, there's nowhere in the earliest readings that there was any concept called human. That's a different and a new creation. That perhaps is the product of the Eve and Adam story. So we have to sort ourselves out. We have to define and declare our own beginning. See the importance of the male and the female principle. Recognize the divinity within the melanin people. And recognize also the animal behavior of human beings. In today's world, the academics who are often financed by Europeans are trying to dismiss Africans as a race. Trying to bring all of us under this umbrella called humans. Well, I and I reject that. I and I is no human. I and I is man. Original man. Divine man. Supreme man. It is I, man, that built the pyramids. It is man that created the calendars. It is man that has created the sciences of chemistry and physics and astronomy. It is the humans who have turned I and I into slaves. And until we begin to reclaim our identity and stop behaving like humans and return to the divinity of man, then we shall always be slaves. But I and I reject that concept of being a slave and holding on to the divinity that is I. MetaMorphOsis. Darwin said, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one that is most responsive to change. Darwin said, a man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. So we have to realize ourselves, this man was born in 1800 and little bit. And I've been here for thousands and thousands and thousands and millions of years. Millions of years. The black people have been on this planet. Millions of years. Just get it right.
Come see I burn up a little island. Babylon fall, the wicked one drop. Each one shall fear the fire of Babylon. Say Babylon, fire can burn Babylon, burn Babylon. Talk a cherry the Babylon. Natty cherry up in a Babylon. Natty cherry all over Rome. Oh, you know in a Babylon. This called African country. That's the place where I wanna go. Way up in a African country. That's the place where my forefathers were. That's the place where I wanna go, you know. Oh, that's the Jeladante, blood, Babylon land. Teach it up in a wicked one. It a go trade in a Babylon.
Now, when you examine the earth in its vastness, oftentimes we only think about Africa and that particular continent. But we have to also bear in mind that in those millennium of years that have gone, the earth was never always the same shape. The landmass have never always been the same sort of configuration. If you have the ability to explore through the various internet services and information that is out there, you have to begin to ask yourself the question, how did those pyramids end up at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean? Yes, pyramids have been found, have been sighted up by the Americans and the Russians from the early 60s. Pyramids that are larger in size than the pyramids on the African continent. Who were the builders of those pyramids? And was it always so that the Atlantic Ocean was always there? Or was there a time when that was landmass? We have to revisit the history of the earth. The earth has its own history. There are continents like South America. There are people called the Incas, people called the Aztecs, that have histories that go beyond 20,000 years. These are cultures that have their own religions, have their own technology. And so we have a question now, whether it's really, do we call these people Africans? Or do we call these people black people? Because these are melanin-based people as well. So the melanin-based people go beyond just the term Africa. Africa was just simply a label attached to the people who were black-faced by the Romans. So the broader identity is being black. And so the Incas and the Aztecs, who had the pyramid culture, who the Europeans invaded and destroyed through guns and drugs and disease, they too felt the wrath of the humans. So we have to look beyond just the name Africa. We have to go into the dimension of places and lands that are given mythological terms but have real historical value. For example, Atlantis. They don't teach us about Atlantis in a historical way. They make us think Atlantis is some kind of fable. But the Atlanteans, ancient society, again, melanin people, black people, and the Atlanteans in their societies make reference to distant planets, distant solar systems. So it's not just the Dogons or the Vadoma people. I would say just African people. It is just a label that is causing the destruction. The basis of the commonality is the fact that all these people are melanin people. These are people who, in the creation story on the 6th day, were part of the migration out of that original space all over the earth. So we can't just limit ourselves to just thinking that yes, we are Africans, because there are black people who are from different parts of the earth who are not necessarily from the continent of Africa, but them black. They are melanin-based people. So we have to open up our imagination and expand our thinking and realize the similarities between the cultures that are ancient. So what they call South Americans, who the Europeans call Indians, and the North Americans, who the Europeans also call Indians, they are melanin people. They are black people. So that is a commonality. The alien in the old structure is the European. The man who's without melanin. The man who's without pigment. The man who claims that his descendants are primates. And it is this man that is having domination over the earth. This human is a minority group. The human race is a minority race when compared to the other races of people on the earth. But they act in the dominant way because they have invaded all of these other spaces and have imposed their ideology. They have created structures based upon colonialism, and they have permeated their ideology of racism. And this ideology of racism is what is seriously problematic now to black people everywhere we go. The idea that this particular race of people are superior. And in the reality, it is a total reverse. Because if you are superior, then you should be able to endure life on the surface of the earth. You should be able to live under the sun. If you can't manage the sun, where is it your superiority? Your superiority then will be manifested in disease, and guns, and violence. And it maintains not superiority now, but it shows your dominance. So the European societies have maintained their dominance through violence, through misinformation, and by promoting the ideology of racism. Places like America, places like London, all of these major European and American societies have been built upon the backbone and the sweat and tears and pain of black people. But within the institutions that the colonial forces establish, these same black people in the majority have been reduced to a minority. And part of the major instrument of reducing us into minority is by taking away our deities. By removing the divinities out of our consciousness and replacing them with images of European people. And so even the God that we respect from the beginning has been tainted and has been pictured as European and white. And to complex the issue, They tell us in that same scripture that this God now sent a son. And this son must look like the father. And so the white ideology, the supremacy ideology is maintained, that the massive of black people on the globe now are now bowing down and giving worship to an image that resembles the European capital. So slavery is no longer simply physical. The slavery has become psycho-spiritual. And as long as the black people, whether you call yourself a South American, whether you call yourself an African, as long as you bow to alien deities, then slavery will continue and the European race will remain in their ascendancy. Military power, guns, drugs, these are the tools to maintain dominance. And I must begin to reject the drugs, the liquor, the cigarette, the fast food. If I begin to reject the things that are culturally driven by Europeans to maintain their sense of dominance. It's not overnight that we have been put into this position. But if we awaken our consciousness, we can reverse the curse. Metamorphosis. Now, there are some of us who have a very, very hard time factoring time into our brain. Our school system only encourages us to multiply up to 12 times. So enough of our brain can go beyond 12 times. Some of us can multiply by 20. Some of us can multiply by 50. So we're beginning to talk about tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of millions. Enough people brain to shut off. Even to handle money in those terms, people can't manage it. But if I begin to think bigger in terms of time. So some of the times that have been presented by the researchers, places, the earliest fish them, the fishing of the sea, the earliest fishes, 450 million years before the Christian era. 450 million years ago, the first type of fish appeared. 400 million years ago, the first plants appeared. And we have to talk about cells, because all life forms are manifested and created out of cells. And you have one cell plants, diatoms. And all things manifest through the multiplication of cells. Then there are evidences now of giant animals on the planet. The dinosaur era. And what happened to those giant birds and fish? How did they become extinct? Lots of research and time have been spent in trying to reconstruct some of these fossils that have been found. So the planet itself now, the planet is considered to be in the billions of years. It's all fascinating and baffling to those who are locked into 6,000 years history of the Christian Bible. So we're talking about millions and millions of years. And we're talking about the melanin man on the planet for that same span of time. We are here for the millions. But it's a lack of memory, the amnesia that we are suffering, that we can't recall ourselves. And so we have to be accepting what the Europeans tell us. And what they tell us suits them. It doesn't empower us. It doesn't help us to transform ourselves from slaves into masters of our own destiny. The earth has also experienced several ice ages, where the polar caps and the temperature of the earth would freeze, become lower and lower. But think about this. With all the ice ages that the planet has experienced, there is not much evidence of any ice ages on the African continent, nor in places like South America, nor in places that are in the equatorial belt. So we have to recognize ourselves as ancient sun people. And that ice age is something that overpowered the places like Europe. So when we even are being programmed into believing now that there was once this flood that drowned out all of man and mankind, we must be aware of the size of the planet and the vastness of the earth and the highness of the mountains. We must notice about the mountains of Africa and the mountains in Asia, the Himalayas, Mount Kilimanjaro. Are we to imagine that all of these places were overcome by water? We have the Kalahari Desert. We have the Sahara Desert. Were these deserts formed after the floods of Noah? And how many years, thousands of years, it required for the desert to be created? We have to wake up, We have to wake up our time sense. We need to be even more aware that the floods of Noah is really a recorded story from the floods that were recorded in the Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. We have to do that reading and that research. The Hebrews simply copied the flood story from the Babylonian Empire. So the Hebrew had Noah, and the Babylonian Empire spoke about Gilgamesh. These are stories that are coming down through ancient times. And we have been tricked to think that all of Africa and Asia got drowned out in a flood by Noah. And furthermore, we must now accept that the entire African black race, all melanin people now, came out of a boat a few hundred years ago that crash landed in a mountain in Turkey. That is totally absurd. It doesn't fit into the historical and geographical history of the earth. So we have to move away those myths and fables. We have to reconstruct our own story. More than likely, we have to find Africa before the floods of Noah. Where was the culture? Where were the Indians? Where were the Chinese before the floods of Noah? And what happened to these massive amount of people after that so-called flood? Because if you read that flood story as presented in the Bible, there is no Chinaman. There is no Indian coming out of Noah's Ark. So why should I and I accept that as a point of restarting, as a point of genesis? It's all set up to confuse I and I. But to say with clarity, we are going to free ourselves. And it's not about controlling the land at first. We have to be able to control our own meditation. We have to be able to control our own consciousness. And if we liberate our consciousness, we shall certainly seize the land. But until we are free in our meditation from fables and mythologies that are destructive, because look at it now. A myth is neither true nor false, but it can be liberating or it can be enslaving. And we need to find the mythologies that liberate us. And we need to jettison and to get rid of the mythologies that makes us slave. And if you look into the book of the Bible, the book of Genesis chapter 1 is a liberating mythology. Chapter 2 is an enslaving mythology. And that is the one we need to get away from. The one that keeps us slaves. Slaves to other cultures. We need to think in time and space with our minds and our brains. Metamorphosis.
You said that you would come alright.
your telephone and call me. Just dial and call, and I'll be there. Pick up your telephone and call me. Just dial and call, and I'll be there. I may take a little time to get there, oh babe. But don't be patient, just relax and I'll be there. Pick up your telephone and call me. Just dial and call, and I'll be there. Just wait. Perhaps, yeah. Ooh, well, yeah. Whoa, yeah. Well, if you really love me, and so how am I going to know? You always tell me, perhaps, perhaps, perhaps. A million times I've asked you, and then I ask you over again. You always tell me.
Well, MetaMorphOsis is arriving to another conclusion. And I want to go by saying that within our relations as males and females, everybody talking about love, and we must love each other and learn to love ourselves, and we can't love nobody till we love ourselves, and we have this sort of argument going around. Well, I'm saying today them know that I think people who love themselves don't have any chance to love nobody else, because them so get obsessed with themselves that them don't have no space to love nobody else. All them talking about is me, and it's me this, and I'm just being me. So I am questioning now whether we need to be having love amongst ourselves as a positive thing. I think it's not leading to any greater unity at the level of gender. So rather than have this self-love, which is no more destructive than self-hate, we should just switch the compass from love to care. Because if you care for yourself, then you find that it will be much easier to care for somebody else. Because care is not about emotional feeling. Care is an action. It's a doing thing. So if you care for yourself, you can care for others. And if you don't care for others, it's hard for you to care for yourself. Well, I think this love thing is a pure bag of confusion. And people only love what they desire in others. And when it's no longer there, the love disappears. And that's why early in our cultural development, our parents would give us a young animal or a pet that we learn to care. We don't love the dog or love the puss or love the bird. The conception is that we must learn to care. And so if we begin to care for each other and care for our children, then we can make a significant change in our relations. This love thing not working. It's not working. People are becoming obsessed with themselves, with this love. They love themselves so much that they have no space to care for anybody else. So may I burn out the love, and may I bring in the care. And with care now comes respect. And if as black people, we want to change the whole psyche of our relations between each other, males and females, and our children, we could leave the love thing out for a while. Long time I sing about, oh, I love you, baby, I love you, baby, I love you. We are in love with sexual activity. We're in love with money. We're in love with power. But what we need for and with each other is care. And with that care comes respect. And with care and respect, you have the foundation now of a union. And then you talk about a family. And we move from the family to the community. And so we can resurrect ourselves as a nation, not on love, but on care and respect. Yeah, what I know as love is a movie thing. Romeo and Juliet and arrows through your heart. Kill them or kill you in your heart. And black people don't love with our heart. We want to care with all our soul. And our soul is in our skin. And that's what I deal with. Metamorphosis, transformation. Too much selfish love. We could deal with care. And with care, we learn to share. Metamorphosis.
Always here. Sit quiet and meditate. Let the good vibes infiltrate. Even when it's dark, don't you ever have no fear, yeah. Cast away your troubles, I say, just for a moment or a day, yeah. Guiding I eternally. Guide I. It's the voice that sets me free. Guide I. Whispering inside of me. Guide I. I feel peace and harmony. Our inner voice, yeah, it guides us along the way, yeah. In the night, oh yeah, this I heard it say. Lift up your heart, take it to the higher plane, yeah. Where there is joy, there is no more pain. Guiding I eternally. Guide I. It's the voice that sets me free. Guide I. Whispering inside of me.
Our listeners, give thanks again for another situation. Hail up Cassidy, engineer, and hail up Styles FM. Give thanks to all those who are in Port Antonio, Portland, St. Mary and St. Thomas, this Northeast region. And congratulations to the team from St. Anne's and Dad on him side for getting to the Premier League playoffs. Still no Portland representation. Still have to speak about the degradation of football in Portland and how can the society, Portland society, accept the position of Carter Park. Yes, it needs a revolution in our thinking. So people, again, peace and prosperity, care and respect, liberation of our thinking, free from racism, and break up the shackles of colonialism. I MAN BLAK, your host. Give thanks. Monday shall be here again. Peace, prosperity, one love, one peace, one black family. Irie.
The distress